Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'd like to talk about spring bolt action airsoft sniper rifles. I've been planning to make a video like this for quite some time now, but I've been waiting until I was confident that I could do it properly, as there's a lot of information I'd like to condense into one sit-in. I've been teching airsoft guns for a long time at this point, and I'm pretty confident working on all types of guns, but what I really cut my teeth on, and what I'm most familiar with, is spring bolt action sniper rifles. There are plenty of videos online on this subject already, and much of what I know I learned there, but I found that most airsoft videos lacked the level of technical detail that I was looking for, and I had to look to multiple different sources of information to fill in the blanks. It's these technical details that I want to focus on. Rather than talking about expensive upgrade parts, I want to provide a thorough understanding of the basic working principles of an accurate scoped rifle. To demonstrate this clearly, we'll build a model of a perfect rifle on paper. Every dimension and tolerance on this model will be absolutely ideal, but it's important to remember that this level of precision is not strictly required and only serves to simplify the explanation. Before we begin, I want to make you familiar with the layout lines we'll be referencing when building this model. These layout lines could be compared to the X, Y, and Z axis in 3D modeling software. Bore axis will be Z. Bore axis is an imaginary line that runs through the bore of a rifle barrel. This line is perfectly centered in the bore and extends out of either end and off into the distance. Plumb, or Y, is a line that describes the force of gravity pulling straight down towards the ground. If you were to tie a weight to a piece of string and then hang it from a nail, when the weight has stopped swaying and is at rest, the line of the string would describe plumb, or perfectly vertical. Level, or X, is a line that is 90 degrees to plumb, or perfectly horizontal. We'll begin assembly of the rifle with the inner barrel on Z, or bore axis. When we add the outer barrel, it should hold the inner barrel perfectly in its center. In other words, both inner and outer barrel are coaxial. They share the same axis. The same can be said when we add the action of the rifle. The inner barrel, outer barrel, and action of the rifle are all coaxial. This could be compared to blueprinting. In the world of long-range precision shooting, when a gunsmith is commissioned to build a precision rifle for a marksman, they would often select an off-the-shelf mass-produced rifle and accurize it by truing up the mating surfaces of the barrel, action, bolt face, and bolt locking lugs to ensure they are all true to the bore axis. This process is called blueprinting. You'll notice I haven't mentioned hop-up yet. I want to leave it out for a moment, but I'll come back to it later during this explanation. Now we'll add the Picatinny rail, and this is where plumb and level come into play. Let's look at the rifle from a different angle. We are now staring down the bore axis as if we were bore sighting the rifle. The bore axis appears as a dot to us from this perspective, with plumb and level intersecting it. The rail is above the bore axis, but its center is plumb to the bore axis. It shouldn't be either offset to the left or the right of plumb. The top of the rail should also be true to level, and not tilted either to the left or the right. Now I'll pin the camera to the y-axis, or plumb, so that it is pointing straight down, giving a bird's eye view of the barreled action and rail base. Viewed from this angle, the sides of the rail base should be perfectly parallel to the bore axis, again not rotated either to the left or the right, and with the line of the bore axis running right down its center. Finally, I'll pin the camera to the x-axis, or level, and look at the barreled action from the side. The rail might be parallel to the bore axis when viewed from this angle, but it's quite common that the manufacturers have angled the rail down slightly towards the muzzle. This is an intended feature and is done so that you are not relying entirely on the internal adjustments of your scope to account for bullet drop. Let's pin the camera back onto the bore axis as it was before, and we'll add the most often overlooked component of an airsoft sniper rifle build, the mounts. Ideally, just like the Picatinny rail, the center line of the mounts should be plumb to the bore axis, and neither tilted or offset either to the left or the right. Again, when viewed from above, both mounts together should describe a line that is perfectly parallel to the bore axis. This level of precision is beginning to look very intimidating, so I feel it's important to remind you that, practically speaking, it is not needed. Remember, this is just the theory side of things. Real life means manufacturing tolerances, practicality, and workarounds, but we'll get to that soon. Before we add the scope, we're going to ensure that it is perfectly optically centered. Let me explain. When you adjust a rifle scope to change the point of impact downrange, you are actually pivoting an internal component of the scope called the erector tube. If the point of aim doesn't match the point of impact, you would turn the adjustment dials on your turrets and pivot the erector tube to compensate for that and bring it back on target. When a scope is optically centered, the erector tube itself is perfectly centered within the body of the scope and tilted neither up or down or left or right. It is in a perfectly neutral position, coaxial with the scope body. Now let's view the barreled action from the rear again, as though we were bore sighting the rifle, and we'll place the scope in the scope rings. The crosshair, or reticle, should be perfectly plumb with the bore axis and the force of gravity, and, like the mount base, when viewed from above, a cutaway of the scope would reveal both the scope body and the erector tube inside are perfectly parallel with the bore axis of the rifle. With the scope leveled and secured in the rings, all the major components of the sniper rifle are in perfect alignment. If we were to fire a BB at a target, its point of impact would be anywhere along the vertical line of your crosshair, regardless of the range. The windage of the scope would already be correct simply by virtue of all the components being in perfect alignment. The only reason a shot would fall to the left or the right would be the wind deflection, cant error, shot group size, or a poorly adjusted hop-up. Let's see how hop-up comes into play. Hop-up is as important to airsoft as rifling is to real firearms. Even if your rifle is set up correctly in every way we've discussed so far, if the hop-up is not functioning as intended, it would all be for nothing. The hop-up in your rifle applies a backspin to the BB as it's fired down the barrel. This backspin creates an area of high pressure below the BB and an area of low pressure above it. The result of this is lift. This extends the range of an airsoft gun without increasing the muzzle energy, so your airsoft gun can perform better while remaining at a safe power for airsoft skirmishing. To an extent, the backspin also stabilizes the BB during flight, and where the hop-up rubber protrudes into the barrel, it serves to hold the BB in place ready to be fired, so it doesn't roll out of the barrel when you point the muzzle down at the ground. The hop rubber also provides an air seal between the loading nozzle and barrel. When a hop-up is functioning as intended, the backspin applied to the BB lifts it up, directly opposed to the force of gravity trying to pull it down. If for any reason the backspin favors a left or right tilt, the BB will not only curve up during flight, but also pull left or right, depending on the direction the axis of rotation is tilted. Now let's fit the hop-up into our perfect rifle. The hop chamber should be installed referencing plumb, so that the hop rubber is set perfectly in the 12 o'clock position. Now, when a BB is fired and its path is observed through the scope, the BB should appear to travel perfectly centered on the vertical crosshair, as the hop-up makes it rise on the way to the target and then fall again as gravity ultimately wins the battle. If a hop chamber has been installed with a tilt to the left or the right, you will see the BB rising and curving to the left or rising and curving to the right, depending on the tilt of the axis of rotation. It can be difficult to observe this in practice when firing your rifle, as this can look very similar to wind deflection. Finally, let's look at the cylinder and trigger assemblies. I left these until last because I wanted to focus on the importance of proper alignment of the essential components first. The alignment of the cylinder and trigger is still important, of course, but there is a much larger margin for error. As long as these parts are aligned well enough to function properly, they'll do their job just fine. The loading nozzle of the cylinder head should be the proper length to seat the BB in the hop chamber to the proper depth. This is extremely important for the hop-up to function properly. The nozzle should also be a good fit in the hop rubber to provide a good air seal. The piston and O-ring must make a reliable and consistent seal within the cylinder to minimize power loss and variation from shot to shot. The spring needs to be powerful enough for the heavier BBs that you'll likely be using as a sniper. Of course, you can select a lower power spring and use lighter weight BBs, but your range advantage as a sniper will suffer greatly. The trigger unit should also be strong enough to handle the heavier springs you'll likely be using. It's not terribly important how you achieve this, either by reinforcing the stock trigger, installing upgrade sears, or replacing it entirely, as long as the result is the same: a functional trigger that doesn't interfere with your ability to shoot. We have now defined the perfect airsoft sniper rifle. All major factors and components have been taken into account, and we now have an ideal model to reference when building our rifle. In the next video, we'll look at how this theory guides the construction of your airsoft sniper rifle. We'll look deeper into how manufacturing tolerances affect the build, how we can check for discrepancies, and we'll discuss where it is and is not worth spending the extra money for upgrade parts. We'll also take an in-depth look at my rifle, and I'll discuss some of the choices I've made and the reasoning behind them. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I had a lot of fun making this episode. A lot of effort went into making this, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to. And as always, I'll catch you next time in the next video. Happy airsofting.